Hello folks, I'm Runal Mehta and welcome back to Digit.com. We are your digital aid and we provide free courses on the subject of business and marketing. This video takes a brief stab on the topic of service quality, along with live examples and case studies. Let's start with the first one.
Let's start with what is service quality and its importance. Service quality involves comparisons of expectation with the actual performance. As per Lewis and Booms, service quality is a measure of how well the service delivered matches customer expectations. Delivering service quality means meeting the requirements of customer expectations on a consistent basis. Service firms can use the service quality in maintaining competitive advantage, and the customers can use the service quality for quality differentiation. Moving on, organizations are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of quality in maintaining competitive advantage. During the last decade, total quality management has been a buzzword for all business. Measuring quality in services is not a simple task since they are intangible and cannot be stored, as discussed in earlier chapters. Generally in services, the evaluation of quality is made during the service delivery process, which mainly comprises of an encounter between the customer and the service provider. Moving on to how do you measure service quality? Managers must measure service quality to identify service quality gaps. Thus, factors such as the type of gap, where it exists, and the remedial actions to be taken depend on measuring the service quality. Measurement of service quality includes soft and hard measures. Let's look at each one of them briefly, starting with hard measures. Hard measures relate to those characteristics of a service that can be counted, timed, or measured through audits. They refer to operational processes or outcomes and include data indicating service response time, failure rates, and delivery cost. In such cases, service firms use control charts. Hard measures include the following. For instance, the number of minutes a customer must wait in line to get to the counter. Next, on-time takeoff of a flight. And finally, the number of patients that made a complete recovery post the operation, in this case, the doctor's success rate. Moving on to the soft measures. Soft measures are those that cannot be easily observed and must be collected by talking to customers, employees, or others. Soft standards provide direction, guidance, and feedback to employees regarding how to achieve customer satisfaction. A proper feedback from customers can make a long-run change in the attitude of the employees and the company. Soft measures include the following, such as ongoing surveys of customers by telephone or mail, a customer advisory panel to offer feedback and advise on service performance, and employee surveys and panels to determine barriers to providing better service and suggestions for improvements. Now, how do you improve service quality? Improving service quality involves the following. First, identifying quality determinants. This is another video that we've covered later on in this module. Then the second way of improving service quality is managing evidence, as in the physical evidence that we discussed in the chapter of physical evidence. Then comes the element of educating customers, developing a quality culture, and automating service. Moving on, the tools to analyze and address service quality problems are: first, the fishbone diagram, also known as a cause and effect analysis. This is covered under the management segment of our courses. Then comes the option of blueprinting. This is covered in the service sector module itself under the chapter of process. Number 3 is a Pareto chart. Then comes the element of total quality management. And finally, Six Sigma. Now moving on to the concept zone of tolerance and improving service quality. We all know that services are heterogeneous. Thus, performance may vary across providers, across employees from the same provider, and even with the same service employee. The extent to which customers recognize and are willing to accept this variation is called zone of tolerance and is shown in the figure. Now let's understand the diagram of zone of tolerance. If the service drops below the adequate service, indicated in a blue bar on the left, the minimum level considered acceptable, customers will be frustrated with the company and the image will be damaged. Now, if the service performance is outside the zone of tolerance at the top, that means at the yellow bar, and where performance exceeds desired service, customers will be very pleased and probably quite surprised as well. You might consider the zone of tolerance as a range or window in which customers do not particularly notice service performance, that is the grey area. When it falls outside the range, that is either very low, that is towards the blue bar, or very high, towards the yellow bar, the service gets the customer's attention in either a positive or a negative way. So simply, if the service falls below the level of adequate service, it would be in a negative way, and if the service reaches a desired service, it would be in a positive way. Let's look at an example of zone of tolerance. Consider the service an airline passenger receives from the ticket counter when checking luggage. Most customers hold a range of acceptable times for this service encounter, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. Now, if a customer enters the line and finds sufficient airline personnel at their counters to serve her in first 2 or 3 minutes, she may judge the service as excellent. On the other hand, if a customer has to wait in line for 15 minutes, she begins to grumble and stares at the employee behind the counters marked counter not open. The longer the wait is outside the zone of tolerance, the more frustrated she becomes. So here, in this case, 2 to 3 minutes and getting the service would be the desired service, and if the service takes about 15 minutes, it would be below the adequate service. Now moving on to some examples of service quality overall. Let's start with the first one, the Oberoi Hotel. In this case, PRS Oberoi, the ex-Tory and perfection. PRS Oberoi, also known as Bicky Oberoi, the ex-chairman of Oberoi Group of Hotels, was famous for his persistence on an egg yolk being correct shade of yellow for use in omelette served at his properties. In fact, several chefs at the Oberoi Hotel were stressed at his habit of randomly breaking an egg to check the color of the yolk, or sometimes even returning his breakfast because the color is not right. As he famously stated, "If I go to a hotel and order eggs and the color of the yolk is not right, I will tell the manager you cannot make an omelette or boiled eggs or even fried eggs from a yolk that is not of the right color." So much for perfection. For him, perfection was not about reaching 99%. He always stated, no, it has to be 99.5%. He acknowledged the fact that luxury and perfection are difficult to achieve. Therefore, he allowed his team for a 0.5% chance of not achieving 100%. And the final example, again in this case of PRS Oberoi, in this case quality and customization. Bicky Oberoi's obsession was so legendary that an affluent guest at the Oberoi Gurgaon in India stated, "A napkin in an Oberoi hotel is whiter than my shirt, and in Delhi, few can afford a shirt as white as mine." Customization is another segment that Oberoi aces at. Every time a guest checks into an Oberoi property, his or her details are factored in. These entail dietary choices, favorite flowers, pillow options, and more. These are maintained and shared across the entire Oberoi hotel ecosystem. For instance, whenever Sanjay Rishi, the former president of American Express South Asia, checks into any of the Oberoi properties, his room is stocked with the brand of Oolong green tea. So that's it, folks. This brings an end to the topic on how do you manage service quality. These are the list of sources and links referred to for the content in the video.
Service quality involves comparisons of expectations with the actual performance. As per Lewis and Booms, service quality is a measure of how well the service delivered matches customer expectations. Delivering service quality means satisfying the requirements of customer expectations consistently. The service organizations can use the service quality in sustaining competitive advantage, and the clients can use the service quality at the point of differentiation. Organizations are becoming more woke for the importance of quality in maintaining a competitive advantage. Moving on to the gap model. Customer service is mainly viewed as a function of perception, customer expectation, and the actual service provided. If the service provided meets customers' wants and expectation, then the customer is satisfied. If the service provided fails to live up to the customer expectation, then the customer is unsatisfied. Unsatisfaction occurs due to the gaps that appear in customer service. Thus, the gap model benefits marketers to identify these service gaps. Let's see how. Ziatmal, Berry and Parsuraman identified 4 potential gaps that arise within the service organization, which may direct to a final and the most severe gap, the service gap. Service gap is the difference between what the customers expect and what they perceive is delivered to them. Gap model has been further explained to identify 6 types of gaps that can occur at various points during the planning and delivering of a service. So now let's look at each of these gaps briefly along with the build-up of the model. Let's start with the first one. Gap 1, knowledge gap. As you can see, it is a gap between what the customer's needs and expectations are and what are the management definition of these needs. Gap 1, not knowing what customers expect is a problem encountered in this gap. Reasons for this gap include lack of synergy between management and customers, lack of communication between contact employees and managers, incompetent market research, and lack of segmentation of customers. Moving on to gap 2, that is a standard gap or the policy gap. Here, not selecting the right service design and standard is the obstacle faced. Reasons for the same include inefficient service design, improper physical evidence, unsystematic new service development process, and failure to connect service design to service positioning. Next, the delivery gap.
Difference between defined standard and delivery team's actual performance on these standards is another gap that is measured in this model. Reasons for the delivery gap include incompetent recruitment, lack of empowerment and perceived control and teamwork, inappropriate evaluation and compensation system, failure to bridge supply and demand, and customers lacking understanding of their roles and responsibilities. The next gap is the communication gap. This gap throws light on companies that fail to match performance with the promises made. Reasons for this type of gap are a tendency to view each external communication as independent, unable to manage client expectation through all forms of communication, not sufficiently educating customers, over-promising and under-delivering, and differences in policies and procedures across branches or units. Next, gap 5, which is the perception gap. This gap focuses on the problem of the difference between what is delivered and what customers perceive that they have received. Reasons for the same include customers don't always correctly understand what the service had done for them. This situation is likely to occur with credent services for which it isn't easy to judge service performance even after delivery. For instance, a doctor explaining the course of the operation to its patient about what was found and what the patient can expect in the future. And finally, gap 6, service gap. Last but not the least, the service gap talks about the difference between what the customers expect to receive and their perception of service that is delivered to them. This gap is the most critical one out of them all, and the terminal goal should be in narrowing or closing this gap entirely. The accumulation of gaps between the earlier stages of 1 to 5 lead to this final service gap.
So that's it, folks. This brings an end to the topic on the gap model. These are the list of sources and links referred to for the content in the video.
Let's start with the introduction. Determinants of service quality point different ways in which consumers judge the quality of service provided. Beru, Parasuraman and Ziatmal distinguished 10 criteria applied by consumers in assessing quality. They are reliability, competence, courtesy, credibility, security, tangibility, access, communication, understanding the customer, and responsiveness. Now, due to a large degree of correlation among the most of these variables, they condense the 10 dimensions into 5 broad dimensions called the Rater model, which stands for reliability, assurance, tangibility, empathy, and responsiveness. Now, let's start with reliability. Reliability out of all the 5 dimensions has consistently been observed to be the most critical determinant of accessing service quality. Reliability means the ability to perform the assured services responsibly and correctly. It is a pointer of how well a company delivers its commitment. Let's look at an example. The most reliable airlines for 2019. A UK-based medical travel insurance provider, GetGoing, found Japan Airlines to be the most reliable airline in the year 2019. It also named the airline as the #1 best airline overall. It was counted based on the percentage of flights delayed, percentage of flights cancelled, average delay, waiting time, safety ranking, and customer rating. Japan Airlines had just 10.54% of flights delayed, around 1% of flights cancelled, and had the lowest delay time of 31.7 minutes. The airline safety ranking garnered a banging 10 on 10, and its customer rating was good at 7 out of 10. Next up is assurance. Assurance is nothing but the staff's knowledge which qualifies them to perform the services efficiently. It is the ability of the firm and its employees to instill faith and assurance in the minds of the customers. Staff competence, credibility, courtesy, and security are the key traits that customers derive assurance from. This particular dimension proves to be critical for services such as banking, insurance, brokerage, medical, and legal sector. Example for assurance, the list of the world's safest banks for 2019. As the potential of macroeconomic disturbance were higher, the global finance ranking of the world's safest bank is particularly valuable in 2019. Here's a list of the banks that made it to the top 10. Next up are tangibles. The presentation of physical facilities, equipment, staff, and communication elements define tangibles. All services have a portion of tangibility, although the significance for the same may vary. Tangibles are usually utilized by service organizations to heighten their image and signal quality to customers. Example, Etihad Airways, the residence. The airline provides a luxury 3-room apartment in the sky. Accommodating up to 2 guests, it highlights a shower room, a private bedroom, a separate living area, a VIP travel concierge, and a dedicated team that takes care of everything one could possibly need. It also provides a chauffeur-driven limousine to the private airport lounge. As always, innovative luxury travel doesn't come cheap. For a one-way flight from Sydney to Dubai, this innovative luxury, the Resident, charges around $23,000 one way. Etihad seeks service very sincerely for its first-class passengers, and its butlers are trained at the world-famous Savvy Hotel. Thus, attention to detail is eminent. The next dimension is empathy. Empathy is often explained as walking a mile in someone else's shoes. The thought is that one can just really understand someone's pain if you've experienced it yourself. This stands equally true when dealing with the request or complaints. Empathy is the ability of understanding consumer needs and offering personalized care attention to them. Employees are required to be considerate about customers at all touchpoints. Easy access, communication, and understanding the customers fall under the purview of empathy. Let's look at some of the examples of empathy. Example 1. Southwest Airlines comfort through turbulence. 9-year-old Gabby, who had type 1 diabetes, was extremely anxious about being on an aeroplane. A Southwest airline flight attendant, Garrick, went leaps beyond his call of duty and worked throughout the flight to make her more comfortable, getting her special drinks and trying to distract her by making her laugh after he noticed her struggling during takeoff. He let her sit in the empty seat next to him when the plane hit a serious patch of turbulence and even let her grab his arm for comfort. At the end, after a safe landing, Garrick used the PA to tell the whole plane that his new friend Gabby had just defeated her fear of flying and that she deserved a round of applause from the entire plane. Example 2. United Airlines delays flight for dying mother. United Airlines flight had a passenger named Kerry Drake who was flying to see his mother, who was experiencing her final hours. He knew that if he missed his connecting flight, he would possibly not see her before she passed. After his first flight's delay, Drake broke down into tears on the plane. The flight stewardess soon noticed his condition and quickly found the reason for the same. Within minutes of this episode, Drake's difficulty was conveyed to the captain, who radioed ahead to Drake's next flight. The flight's crew acknowledged by delaying the flight's departure just to make sure he got on board. After realizing how much went behind getting him on the plane, he was overwhelmed with emotions, and this encounter reflected the human side of the company. And the final dimension of the Rater model, responsiveness. Responsiveness is the enthusiasm to help customers and render timely services. Being the last dimension, it emphasizes on attentiveness and agility in dealing with consumer needs, requests, problems, and acquisitions. A company's responsiveness is calculated by the duration of the time the customer has to wait for proper assistance. Let's look at an example for responsiveness. Under Wendy's umbrella. During a heavy rainstorm one fine day, a Wendy's employee pulled out an umbrella from the store table just to walk an elderly gentleman to his car to protect him and keep him warm against the harsh weather. The employee put his task aside and went outside to look out for an old man from the rain. A passerby was able to catch this heartwarming moment and posted on Reddit, which instantly went viral on the internet.
So that's it, folks. This brings an end to the topic on service quality. Do subscribe to our channel where you'll witness such videos daily. Thank you and stay tuned for more videos.